Auburn did get the number 1 overall seed after all. Is it the right call?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, happy Monday after selection show. No transfer portal open today, thank goodness. Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. We're your hosts. This is my guy, Andy Patton. I'm Isaac Schade, and you're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listener watch to learn everything you need to know about the 2025 March Madness bracket. And we want to remind you can catch every one of these shows ad-free on Amazon Music. Special shout out to all the everydayers who are here with us. And of course, all the great members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord. You want to join that? That link's in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Well, folks, Andy Patton and I are recording from within the same building in the heart of Dallas, Texas. We're just in different rooms. We're at a hotel, the Omni Hotel in Dallas, Texas, recording studio shows for Locked On and Amazon Fire TV channels, all these bracket breakdown shows. If you haven't heard about these or seen them, man, you need to go check it out. It's great stuff with a whole cast. And best of all, Andy and I are meeting for the first time ever in person.
Clearly, we're already sick of each other. That's why we're not in the same room.
Right. No, literally, we're not in the same room because we can't figure out how to internet. So, Andy, coming up on the show today, it is the day after selection show Sunday. And so we've got a whole bracket to break down, and that's where we're headed. The SEC sets a brand new record. We're going to talk about the controversial bubble decisions out of this tournament selection committee. But first, we got to start at the top of this thing with the 1 seeds. Andy, very simply, Auburn number 1 overall, Duke number 2 overall, Houston number 3 overall, and Florida number 4 overall. This is what we expected like this time last week, and it didn't change. Was that the right call by this committee?
You know, I think so. I can understand why Florida fans would be upset. I mean, obviously, this is a team that went ahead and won the SEC tournament. It's the toughest conference we've probably ever seen, and we're going to talk about that more. 14 teams from the SEC in the NCAA tournament. Their non-conference record as a conference was unbelievable, and we've preached it all season long. I mean, not just us, but pretty much anybody who's been following college basketball on a regular basis has been talking about the depth and overall talent level in the SEC. And so if you're Florida and you go out and you win the SEC, and you win the SEC tournament, you have a really strong finish to the season. You beat the number 1 team in the country. You didn't even play the team that was number 1 in this tournament in the SEC tournament championship because they didn't get there. And then you get the 4th 1 seed. Like, I can understand why Florida fans might be like, hey, why wasn't this us? Why were we not only not 1st, but 4th when Auburn was number 1? But as you and I have talked about so many times, this Auburn team's resume was so good and was so far ahead of everybody else with how many quad 1 wins they had, how much dominance we saw from them in the non-conference and of course into conference play. Yes, they lost 3 of their 4 most recent games. And yes, the precedence for that is probably not great going into the NCAA tournament, but this team was, again, already in a position where they had a resume just significantly better than everybody else's in college basketball. And the way that you see the NCAA tournament is not based on your most recent success. It is a factor, but it is not a big enough factor for the committee to change their mind about Auburn being number 1. And I think that was the correct choice, but I do understand the dissenters.
And always for me, Andy, the regular season matters wildly more than the conference tournament. Mm-hmm. And look, I get it that there would be naysayers to that as well, because we have unbalanced schedules unless you're the Big East or Mountain West has 2 round robin, right? Am I thinking?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. So I get that those two both do it. And so some naysayers would push back, and I hear that, and I get that argument. But still, the longevity of the SEC is still only at 18 games. They're the holdout there. But still, doing what Auburn did over a series of 18 games versus what Florida has been doing wonderfully, especially now that they're getting healthy and they've added Micah Handlocked into the mix to boot on top of all that. Like, Florida is rolling right now. But I don't think that the conference tournament championship weight is going to necessarily hold more than the regular season weight in the eyes of the committee, at least.
Yeah. And I think I understand that, but that doesn't mean that Florida's in a worse position than Auburn. Like they both got,
Sure.
I think that Florida got a decent draw. I think they have an opportunity. They got UConn versus Oklahoma as the 8-9 in theirs. And all these 8-9s are just brutal. Like it's the 8-9 line in this particular tournament is, and we kind of knew that coming into this, that was going to just be the situation. Baylor's a 9 seed, Gonzaga's an 8 seed. Like, there's just some really, really good teams in the mix for those 8-9 seeds. But I think Florida's in a pretty good position. The team that I'm really curious about is Duke. Duke, we kind of expected widely that they would be the number 2, the second 1 seed. That was the situation they found themselves in. But obviously, the storyline with Duke is the health of Cooper Flagg, the health of Malik Brown. What's going on with this team? As they get into the NCAA tournament, we were slightly curious if it was going to impact their seeding. It does not appear that it did. But at this point, mum's the word on Cooper Flagg from the Duke Blue Devils. They, the indication is that he's practicing and that they're kind of hoping to get him right. But Isaac, if you were Duke right now and you saw that you had a matchup against the winner of a play-in 16 game between American and Mount St. Mary's, would you play Cooper Flagg? Again, without knowing the severity of the injury, the high ankle sprain, low ankle sprain, how he's feeling, but like, would it require fully 100% complete health for you to play Cooper Flagg, or would you be willing to play him even if he wasn't quite at full strength? And what's your read on that for Duke?
If I'm not playing him against North Carolina and against Louisville in the ACC semis and championship game, there's no way on earth I'm playing him against either American or Mount St. Mary's, Andy.
Yeah.
And part of that is we were just talking with Monique Billings, who's on the bracket breakdown with us, a great UCLA player. And what she was saying is literally every day you get extra rest on an ankle injury or something like that, high or low ankle, is so helpful to the player. I was really grateful for her insight with that. And what's great for Duke is that they're in a Friday, Sunday matchup, Andy, instead of a Thursday, Saturday. So that's already one extra built-in day. And then if you hold him out on Friday, that means he's not playing again till next Sunday, which is 10 days after he initially sprained it. Yep. And that is what I'm trying to do if I'm Duke. I've made this joke multiple times on Sunday. If I'm John Shire, I'm sitting my dudes down and I'm saying, look, fellas, we just won the ACC tournament without Cooper Flagg and without Malik. If we can't get past, again, I apologize for dumping on American and Mount St. Mary's, but if we can't get past those guys without Cooper, what are we talking? We should not be the number 2 overall seed. But you look at this roster, man. Con Knippel stepped up in major ways last week. You talked about that some late last week, Andy, and Isaiah Evans steps into the starting lineup now in place of Cooper Flagg last week. And then good grief, Proctor went off in the championship. So you got all of these guys. That's part of this Duke team, man, is they are deep and they've got dudes everywhere, even without Cooper and even without Malik.
And second round matchup for Duke, assuming, of course, that they get past the 16 seeds, would be either the 8 seed Mississippi State or it would be the 9 seed Baylor, which potentially could set up a very fun rematch with Jeremy Roach, four-year player for Duke, who's, of course, now a 5th-year senior at Baylor. So definitely something to keep an eye on. They're going to want Cooper Flagg back for that game, guaranteed. Again, they probably, in theory, should be able to get by either of those teams without Cooper Flagg. But I can guarantee you John Shire is going to feel a lot more comfortable with him, not only in the mix for that matchup, but fully healthy, or as fully healthy as he's going to be. So I'm with you. I think sitting him as long as they can to get ready for that game is going to be the best thing for that program going forward. Last number 1 seed, Houston, the third 1 seed. Parker Ainsworth joined us on the Bracket Breakdown show earlier to talk about this seed for the Cougs and kind of mentioned that he felt like the bracket didn't really favor them all that well. They got 8 seed Gonzaga versus 9 seed Georgia, Battle of the Bulldogs for the round of 32. Whoever wins that'll likely play Houston in that second round game. They also have Tennessee as their 2 seed, Kentucky the 3 seed, Purdue the 4 seed, Clemson the 5 seed, Illinois the 6 seed, UCLA the 7 seed. Obviously, we didn't lay out the top 7 for the other sides of this bracket, but that's a pretty tough 2 through 7. I don't blame Parker and Houston fans for looking at that and being like, wow, if we make it to the Final Four, we're going to have earned it. That is for sure. And for Houston, obviously, a big storyline for them the last few years has been not being fully healthy in the NCAA tournament. And certainly if this Houston team can be at full strength going through this tournament, they have a good chance of advancing and being in the Final Four, but it is not going to be easy for LJ Cryer, Milos Uzan, and this Cougars team.
One of the things that Parker talked about on Bracket Breakdown was that Houston is healthy this year. And Andy, I appreciate that, but until we know about Juwan Roberts, Cooper Flagg's ankle is not the only ankle we're worried about on a number 1 team. I need to see that Juwan Roberts is good to go, because that's another like without him, that like he to me is the heart and soul of this team in the way that it was Jamal Schade last year and Marcus Sasser the year before. Like I just that is one of my few hesitations with Houston is that they don't seem to have that dude, right? Like LJ Cryer is great, but Andy, there is one player on Houston's roster whose defensive rating is over 100, and guess who that is?
Who?
LJ Cryer.
LJ Cryer.
And like Marcus Sasser and Jamal Schade wouldn't have even sniffed something like that, right? And so that's what we're looking at. And so that's just part of the equation here with Houston. And Andy, we also can't miss the fact that they were not in the top 12 of the Week 6 AP poll, which for those who don't know, if each year since 2003, the champion has come from the top 12 of the Week 6 AP poll. It's just this weird phenomenon, but Houston wasn't in it, so they ain't winning.
Folks, you may have noticed that we talked about 2 1 seeds being from the SEC, and we talked about the 2th seed and the 3 seed in Houston's bracket, Tennessee and Kentucky, also being from the SEC. That's a little unusual, and folks, that's because 7/8 of the SEC is going dancing. Is that the right number? We're going to talk about it in just a second. But first, folks, eating healthy doesn't have to be complicated. With Factor, you get chef-made, dietitian-approved meals that are ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes, so you can fuel your body without the hassle of cooking. Factor meals arrive fresh, never frozen, and with 40 options across 8 dietary preferences each week, you can customize your menu to fit your goals, whether that's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. I've got such a busy life, so I just love how Factor keeps me on track with healthy, delicious meals without the time-consuming prep. And Factor has great variety and taste. The Korean beef bowl and creamy Parmesan chicken are some of my absolute favorites. They taste homemade, but they don't take any effort. Eat smart with Factor. Get smart started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code FACTORPODCAST at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
This episode is also brought to you by Supply House. Look, get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. You need help with an order? Well, great news. Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage, and now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Andy Patton and Isaac Schade here with you on what is technically Monday already in the Omni Hotel in Dallas from our hotel rooms. I only bring it up because it's 1:20 a.m. local time here in the central time zone of our great United States of America. And I also bring that up because maybe you can hear the loud Mexican music playing outside my window for some ungodly reason at this time in the morning. I'm surprised there hasn't been a complaint filed at the front desk. Whatever. Andy, we want to talk about conference affiliation. The committee says that they don't look at these things, right? Like they just look at teams and resumes and however that breaks down. I appreciate that. I've always wondered, like, how in your humanity do you actually do that? Yeah. Because we all know these conference breakdowns. So I've always just wondered, like, if I was going through the process, how would I go about being able to handle that? I don't know if it's possible, but Andy, in the year 2011, we got exactly 11 Big East teams into the NCAA tournament. That was the most ever. The SEC just shattered that number, getting, as you said, 7/8. That's a tough word. 8ths. You know what else is a tough word? 12ths. To get all the, you got to move your tongue around a lot. Try it, folks, at home or in your car, wherever you are right now. 7/8 of their conference made it into this dance. The only 2 teams not in are South Carolina and LSU, which were the only 2 teams that were not a Q1 game on a neutral site. Andy, is this the right number? Too many? Too few? Where are you at?
Yeah, it feels like too many, but at the same time, I do understand it. again, as you just alluded to, the fact that LSU and South Carolina were the only two teams in this conference that weren't Q1s like this team. Again, what we've seen with these bloated conferences, and again, it's a very recent history of this, obviously, is that they do have the ability to kind of help each other out with the way they schedule in the non-conference and potentially be able to put together situations where every single time they play each other, it gives them a quad 1 game or a quad 2 game. And then therefore they kind of are all continuing to boost their respective resumes together. The SEC is kind of doing that, but like, I don't think it's as much as the bubble was kind of weak this year. We're going to talk more about that. I do agree that, Texas, again, we'll talk more about Texas in a second, was a team that, a lot of people didn't necessarily think deserved it, but I don't think they were the least deserving of the bubble teams to get a spot in the bubble. There were multiple other teams that I thought were less deserving than them that got into the field. So again, it's not exactly that for Texas. I think the SEC was just great this year. I mean, it's an incredibly deep conference in terms of coaching. The amount of great coaches in this conference is staggering. I mean, in any iteration of this this conference, you're talking about somebody like Nate Oates or Bruce Pearl or Todd Golden or Rick Barnes or John Calipari. Like somebody in there is like fifth best coach in the conference. And we haven't even gotten to Chris Jans, who's a great coach, or Chris Beard, who's a great coach. Like It's great. Mark Pope, like it's an insanely deep conference from a coaching perspective. It's an insanely deep conference from a talent perspective, from an NIL perspective. The pockets are deep. So yeah, I'm not shocked necessarily that the SEC got 14 out of their 16 teams in the NCAA tournament. Do I think that trend will continue? Probably not. If it does, I think there's going to be some concern from the rest of college basketball, because that probably means there's some hoarding of talent going on in that conference that people maybe feel like they're having a hard time competing with, which frankly is a direction we wouldn't be shocked to see happen in this sport.
We see you, Greg Sankey. We know what you're doing.
Right, exactly. But for this year, for the teams that would have replaced somebody like Texas or an Oklahoma or somebody like that in the field, I don't think there was a lot of more deserving candidates. So I think this is probably the right number.
Yeah. And we'll certainly get to that conversation in the next segment when we get to bubble talk, because it's interesting. Andy, as for the other conferences that got multiple bids, we had the Big 10 with 8, the Big 12 with 7, Big East with 5, and ACC and Mountain West both with 4, and the West Coast Conference.
Yeah.
West Coast Conference got 2. I think that's it for our multi-bid conferences. And then we had our 31 AQ. Some of those obviously a part of the conferences we just named. Andy, as you look, I mean, I feel like I got to ask you about the Big 10, because this is where we go every year at the beginning of the year and the end of the year. The Big 10 has not won a national championship since the year 2000. Michigan State. Now, the Pac-12 has not won a national championship since 97 or 8.
Yep, 97.
And that's going to be at least another 2 years before they can even think about it, because it doesn't exist right now. But as you look at this Big 10 makeup, they don't have a 1 seed. Michigan State's the highest seed at 2. UCLA is at 7. So that's interesting. Andy, you pointed this out, actually. There are 8 Big 10 teams, and they're all somewhere between a 2 and 7 seed. My question is, can one of these break the drought?
Yeah, I think Michigan State can. Like, I think
you felt, honestly, I believed you when you said that. I mean, you said that with conviction and gusto.
Right. Like, I don't think that they will. I'm not a huge believer in Michigan State. I think I'm a huge believer in Tom Izzo. But again, I mean, the last time a Big 10 team won a championship was Tom Izzo, but it was 25 years ago. Like, it's been a while since that happened. I think this Michigan State
was Jason Richardson on that. Was Jason?
Actually, he might have been. I didn't even think about that.
Let me look it up while you're talking.
On that team, I do love Jace Richardson. I do love the talent on this roster, but I think there's too many other good teams, and I'm not favoring Michigan State to do it. I think there are some other teams, like Purdue could catch lightning in a bottle and make some serious noise on the 6 seed line, but none of these teams got super favorable draws. Again, like we said, nobody's lower than a 7. UCLA is the 8th team in the Big 10 that's in the NCAA tournament, and they got a 7 seed. There's nobody on the 8, 9, 10 line, nobody on the bubble. Again, we'll talk about that later, but Indiana, a team that many people thought should have been on the right side of the bubble, and they were not, which was a bit of a surprise. But a lot of decent Big Ten teams, a lot of teams in the 5 line. Oregon's a 5 seed. Again, UCLA is a 7 seed, Purdue's a 6, Illinois is a 6. Like, they're all kind of in that mix. I think we'll see a handful of Big Ten teams go to the Sweet 16. I wouldn't be surprised if we see 1 or maybe even 2 Big Ten teams in the Elite 8, maybe. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's a true title contender, and I think that streak continues for that conference.
And we'll figure out just how far those teams are going to go as we get later in the week. On tomorrow and Wednesday's show, we'll go region by region and break all that down. Andy, I've just changed my answer. Michigan State is clearly going to be the national champion this specific year. Do you know why?
It's got to be because of the Richardsons, right?
Right. And very specifically, Jason was a freshman on that team, just like Jace is a freshman this year. So it's in the cards. January, February, Izzo. It's happening. Andy, Big 12. Past couple years, been the best conference in basketball according to most metrics. This year, it's 3rd behind not only the SEC, but also the Big 10. Have we taken a step back in the Big 12, or is it just strength from the other 2?
It's a bit of strength from the other 2. I think it's also a few teams that took a bit of a step back. I wouldn't say the whole conference did. Houston's still great. Iowa State obviously had some injury issues that impacted their overall resume, but they were still great. Their peak is still phenomenal. Texas Tech, still a phenomenal team. Arizona, again, had some struggles at times this year, but ultimately finished really strong, 3 seed for them. So Kansas being down hurt the strength of the conference without a doubt. Baylor being down significantly hurt the strength of the conference. Kansas State had a rough year. Cincinnati had a rough year, but at the same time, BYU was awesome. They ended up getting a 6 seed. They had a really fantastic season. So I don't think the league is like headed in the wrong direction or anything like that. I don't think that that's really based in reality at all. I think that there was just a few teams that had down years, and the SEC was so unbelievably good. And the Big Ten added program. I mean, the Big 12 added Arizona and then 3 programs that weren't all that great this past offseason. Whereas for the Big Ten, they added programs that 2 of them in particular helped with the strength of the conference, whereas obviously USC and Washington did not. But I think the Big 12 is still in a really healthy spot. And there's some really good teams in this tournament, not even just Houston on the one line, but some other really good teams that are going to give teams some serious fits in the big dance.
Andy, you mentioned Washington. I actually learned something about the Huskies tonight that you might not know. The Washington Huskies campus is actually in Hartford, Connecticut. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Folks, go look it up. It's the craziest thing that Andy and I learned. Andy, let me just mention a couple things about the other multi-bid conferences, and then just see if there's anything else you want to say before we move on. ACC does get a 4th bid with North Carolina. Again, no bubble talk right now. We'll get to that in the next segment because plenty to say about that controversy. But had North Carolina not made it, the ACC would have had their fewest teams in the field since 2000. Funny enough, we bring that up again, when it was only Duke and North Carolina and the now Big Ten Maryland Terrapins. As for the Big East, Andy, they have more teams this year. Remember last year, they only had 3. It was just UConn and Marquette and Creighton. This year, they get all 3 of those plus St. John's and Xavier. We'll talk bubble about them later. And then Mountain West, they dropped down by 2. If I'm right, they had 6 last year.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and so now this year they have New Mexico, Utah State, Colorado State, and San Diego State, with Boise State on the outside looking in. Again, we'll talk bubble in a little bit. Andy, the one specifically I want to ask you about with that is the Big East. They have more schools, but I think a lower ceiling than last year. And obviously part of that is just UConn is not what UConn was last year. I hear that. But I mean, beyond UConn as well, it feels like that to me, that it's more volume than elite.
Yeah, I mean, I think it pretty clearly is. I mean, not only is UConn down, Creighton's also an 8 seed or a 9 seed, and Marquette's, I think, a 7 seed. Like, the only team that really is in a comfortable position to make a deep run in this NCAA tournament out of the Big East is St. John's. And I feel very confident in Rick Pitino's team. I've mentioned this a bit on Bracket Breakdown. I'm a little concerned about the 3-point shooting. I know that they have done a tremendous job this season without needing to rely on the 3-point shot. And it's very unusual in this era, but we also have historical heaps of data that teams that don't shoot the 3 ball very well rarely win national championships. So I do have, like, I think if St. John's were to bow out early or even just not make the Final Four, 3-point shooting would very likely be a reason beyond that. But I'm, again, not even just because of seeding, although that is a huge part of it, just much more confident in this team's ability to make a run than, say, Creighton, who's dealt with injuries and significant inconsistency, UConn, whose defense is a big problem for them, Marquette rebounding a big issue for them, and just really relying on Cam Jones to make things happen offensively. So, yeah, I think we're looking at a Big East that's got 5 teams, and I wouldn't be shocked if they have one Sweet 16 team. I really would. I think 2 is probably more likely, although I don't know exactly who. But again, I mean, with UConn and Creighton got to play a 1 seed in the second round, and Marquette's got to play a 2. So yeah, it could very much be St. John's standing alone in the Sweet 16 out of the Big East.
Hey, why are you dumping on these 16 seeds? You don't think we can get a third ever 16 to beat a 1, Andy?
I don't. Not this year.
How dare you just blow by that matchup like it's nothing? I am so mad at you right now. No, also I'm still so sad we didn't get UConn in Duke's bracket because I really wanted that to happen.
It's so fun.
Andy, before you move us along, we just want to shout out 4 teams that have made the NCAA tournament for the first time ever. That is High Point, UC San Diego, Omaha, and SIUE. San Diego is a 12 seed. The other 3 are all 16 seeds. And Andy, you had something interesting to point out about the UC San Diegos.
The Tritons, believe it or not, the UC San Diego Tritons being the mascot. That's not what it was, but I will also point that out. UC San Diego, this is their first year of eligibility into the NCAA tournament. They had the 4-year waiting period between the D2 and D1. And UC San Diego, first team to send both their men and their women's team to the NCAA tournament, each in their first year of eligibility at the D1 level. So very cool for UC San Diego. Obviously, it was a fun battle between them and UC Irvine. A lot of people hoping that both those teams would get into the NCAA tournament, and they did not. And Irvine was a team that wasn't quite as hotly contested as Indiana State last year in terms of getting a bubble seed, but the conversation around the bubble this year wasn't as much about the teams that didn't get in, although I do have some qualms about a couple of teams in particular. But honestly, Isaac, the conversation was about the teams that did get in because North Carolina made it. And we have a lot of questions, namely how, what, and why. So let's talk about it. But first, folks, March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Because right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's going to be cutting down the nets. So on FanDuel, when you win, you get paid instantly, so there's no waiting around. And with tournament games happening almost every single day, there's always exciting action to get in on. We've talked about the number 1 seeds, folks. They are the top 4 teams in terms of projected to win the national championship. But Duke is got the highest odds at plus 310, followed by Florida at plus 400. And then you get Auburn, your number 1 overall seed, at plus 500, followed again by Houston at plus 700. If you like any of those odds, if you like any of the game odds for the upcoming play-in games, we're going to talk about those matchups here in a second. Just visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, as I closing out the show, talking about the bubble. Conversation we've had throughout this season. We've talked about so many different teams. What's the resume look like? We've talked a ton about 4 of the teams that did end up on the bubble. And I think we got to start this conversation with North Carolina because that was the big storyline coming into the tournament, or coming into Selection Sunday, coming out of Selection Sunday, certainly, was that North Carolina was named one of the teams in the play-in game. We have North Carolina taking on San Diego State, both as playing into an 11 seed in the bracket where they would face number 6 seed Ole Miss. Hey, look, shout out another SEC team. And then you got Xavier and Texas as 11 seeds. The winner would play number 6 Illinois out of the Big Ten. So you got another SEC team there in Texas as well. So those are your 4 teams. I think the notable things here, again, we'll talk North Carolina first, but the teams that did not find themselves on the right side of the bubble would be Boise State, which we kind of expected after they got walloped by Colorado State in the Mountain West Conference Tournament Championship. Ohio State, who kind of felt like they'd been on the wrong side of the bubble for a while. But then Indiana and West Virginia. And Indiana was a team that definitely on the bubble, definitely in those conversations of potentially not making the tournament. But most folks felt fairly confident that Mike Woodson and the Hoosiers were going to get a bid. And then West Virginia was a team that, frankly, a lot of people didn't even have on the bubble. A lot of people had them fairly securely in the field of 68. In fact, I think Bracket Matrix had over 100 brackets submitted, and every single one of them had West Virginia in the field. So very surprising to see West Virginia not make it. I think, again, the conversation of like, oh, it should have been UC Irvine or, whatever, like there are teams that some people felt maybe were left out, but I don't think anybody expected to be saying, how did West Virginia not make it? And how did North Carolina and Xavier, for that matter, get a bid over West Virginia? It surprises me. Isaac, what were your thoughts seeing North Carolina show up on that 11 seed line?
Andy, it was funny because we got zero suspense on that. So folks behind the curtain, we were along with the rest of the crew and cast of folks that were doing the bracket breakdown. We were sitting in the green room watching all this together, and like North Carolina is in Auburn's bracket. So it was like the first, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So they would have been like the 10th team or pair in their case with San Diego State revealed. So it was very shocking. I think we were all just like, not expecting to see North Carolina. So to see them pop up in the first bracket, I think took everyone's breath of like, what is happening? I kind of ran around like a fool idiot. For those of you who don't know, I also host Locked On Tar Heels. And I think, Andy, I've been trying to process, like, why did I react that way? Because this shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
North Carolina should not be in the NCAA tournament this year. Like, plain and simple. They have had so many chances and they didn't take advantage of them. Now, here's what I will say, Andy. I think North Carolina is a tournament caliber team. I think they are playing like a team that is a team that competes in the NCAA tournament. But it ain't just about that. It's about your resume and what you've done to be deserving to be in the NCAA tournament. And I don't think North Carolina has hit that mark. That said, should North Carolina go out early this week and lose to San Diego State, it is not an indictment against the selection committee. Yeah. By the other token, should North Carolina go out and pull a VCU or UCLA and run all the way to the Final Four, it's also not an endorsement of the selection committee. So like, I think we just have to be careful of calling it one way or another because of what these teams, I'm with you on Xavier. Like everyone talked about North Carolina only having one quad one win. Xavier's in the same boat. But I don't think their success or failure in this tournament is an endorsement or indictment on the committee.
Yeah, at some point your record has to matter more than I think it did in this situation. And I think that's what is frustrating about this. Not even just quad one record. There is more to a tournament resume than quad one record. And I know that it is the most off-cited specific data point in the modern,
because people get it. It makes sense.
It used to be BPI. It's always changed, like what this kind. But right now it's quad one record, and it does make sense, and it is a valuable data point. And North Carolina's record in quad one games horrendous. But at some point, again, you got to just win games. Like you left out a UC Irvine team that went 28-4. Like I know that their schedule doesn't even hold a candle to North Carolina's, and that's in a weak ACC, but it doesn't even hold a candle to it. I get that, but North Carolina beat one good team this year, and it was a game that UCLA kind of pooped away. Like that's like realistically, that's what happened. Like this North Carolina team didn't play well in almost every game they played against a good quality opponent. They had a tremendous Herculean effort to come back against Duke in the ACC tournament, and then unfortunately were not able to finish that game in heartbreaking fashion. But at the end of the day, it has to matter. And you look at Xavier, same thing. They beat Marquette on the road. That's a good win. That's a good with a capital G win. But they also lost the two other times they played Marquette. They lost both times they played St. John's. Like they have road losses, quad two road losses to Georgetown and TCU. Like the Xavier team's resume is not very good. And I don't even think you can make as strong of an argument where with North Carolina, you can say, yeah, you watch their games, watch their recent performances. They look like a tournament team. Yes, I agree. I'm not sure Ryan Conwell looks awesome. Ryan Conwell looked awesome against Marquette. Does Xavier look like a tournament team to me? I don't know. I feel for Ryan Conwell, who was on that Indiana State team last year. He got back in the tournament this year. Like he gets a little bit of revenge, I suppose, for making the tournament in this situation. But there's not a lot of people are necessarily excited to see Xavier and Ryan Conwell in the tournament this year. So I'm intrigued. Texas, we haven't talked about Texas, San Diego State. I'm much more comfortable with them being in the field. Texas, again, to cite quad one records, I think they have 7 quad one wins, and Texas didn't finish very well in the conference season. And I think that does matter to some extent. And that's why they were on the bubble. But when they needed to get wins towards the end of the season, they did it. These other teams, they didn't. And so for me, that kind of is where I sway in favor of Texas, and am surprised to see Indiana, who did finish the season strong, not get a bid. Even West Virginia didn't finish the season as strong, but the body of work for them felt strong enough to get in this field, and to see both those teams left out in favor of teams in North Carolina and Xavier, it doesn't feel like the committee got it right in this situation.
Yeah, and I hate it for both West Virginia and Indiana,
Yeah.
Andy. Like with West Virginia, it's like Darren DeVries comes over, loses his son, who should be their star player, to injury. Javon Small's been having an insane year for West Virginia. And it's like, oh, man, they're going to get in. We didn't expect them to do anything. And here they are going to get into the NCAA tournament.
We were like trying to figure out which team didn't make it. Like, we were like, who? Like,
because it was so far off the butt. We were like,
yeah, it wasn't even on our radar.
Because we didn't expect Xavier, Texas, or UNC. At least I didn't, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, these three teams are all in that I thought were out. So there's got to be teams that are out that we thought were in. And West Virginia is one of them. And it's also tough because Coach DeVries is sitting there looking at Drake. His former team has got 30 wins and is having just an absolute run of a year. And then Indiana, of course, as well, really, really has circled the wagons well after the Mike Woodson stepping away announcement. And I truly, Andy, I thought the Hoosiers had done enough. Like earlier in this season, I would have laughed if you would have told me that. But as we sit here the day after Selection Sunday, I truly thought their resume spoke for itself, and that they had owned that well, and we're going to go dancing in Mike Woodson's final year. I think that's a miss as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I want to say one more thing here, looking at the bubble, because we have seen a pretty crazy stat. At least one Final Four participant first four, not Final Four. At least one first four participant has advanced to the second round in 12 of the last 13 tournaments, which means that statistically, one of these four teams is probably not only going to, obviously two of these teams are going to win and play 6 seeds, but there's a good chance that at least one of them actually advances all the way to the round of 32 to face potentially a 3 seed. Isaac, if you were to guess which of these four teams is going to do it, who are you going with and why?
Mount St. Mary's. They're going to
You're
knock
not
off.
going with American? Come on.
No, just Mount St. Mary's has too much for American, and then they're going to shock the world and beat. No. For me, I also want to look at the matchups, not just, beating each other. And so I'm looking at the San Diego State, North Carolina one, the Texas Xavier one. I feel like it would, based on matchups, I don't feel good about Texas or Xavier playing Illinois.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's got to be the winner of the San Diego State UNC game. With all due respect to Stephen Willis, the great host of Locked On Ole Miss, I just feel like Ole Miss isn't as strong a team as is Illinois. And so basically my thought is whoever wins between San Diego State and North Carolina.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think Ole Miss is I think Illinois is a better team than Ole Miss, especially at full strength. I agree with you there. But I think Texas is the best team out of this group, so I think I'm inclined to pick Texas. I think Texas beats Xavier, and I think they put up a heck of a fight against Illinois. I think that there's a reasonable chance if Trey Johnson just goes absolutely insane bonkers, which we know he's capable of doing. Which first of all, let's talk about the freshman matchups that you will get in a first-round game between Illinois and Texas. Were that to come down, you get Trey Johnson versus Kasparis Jakusionis versus Will Riley.
No, Andy, stop. We're going to say his name right. We're going to get it correct.
KJ.
Just Jonas. AJ, there it is.
Jonas. Going to see a really fun matchup if that were to happen. Obviously, Texas got to get by Xavier. No guarantee that they do that, but I think Texas has a chance to actually do it. And I do agree with you again. North Carolina could definitely beat Ole Miss. That's absolutely possible. I think San Diego State could too. A little less confident in that, in their ability to do so. But this is a tough year to pick it because, as we say so often, the bubble not only feels weak, but Ole Miss and Illinois are pretty darn good teams on that 6 line. So I'm curious to see if this streak will continue or if we'll have another kind of blip year where this doesn't happen. But the statistics tell us that it's probably going to happen. So I'm curious to see how it shakes out.
Yeah, Andy. And so, folks, the reason I stopped Andy is because we were literally joking earlier on Sunday evening about trying to pronounce Jakusionis' last name. And so that's my interjection there. We're just a little fun between friends. So, man, it's going to be so interesting. Obviously, gang, we got a ton more to get to before we get these games rolling. Tomorrow night, Tuesday, we will have 2 of these 4 play-in games. So get ready and buckled up for that. So tomorrow we are going to preview the left side of the bracket and some Tuesday night's playing games. Wednesday, we'll do the right side of the bracket and look back at Tuesday night's playing games and look forward to Wednesday's playing games. And then obviously Thursday, it all gets going. Buckle up, get your nachos, get your chicken dip. I don't know what you're eating. Andy, what do you like to eat when you're watching the NCAA tournament?
Nachos and chicken dip, obviously. No, like we were talking about before, as a West Coaster, the games start for me at 9 a.m. So I can have breakfast in the morning. I have coffee with those first few games. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, just snacking and watching those games all day, and then back with you next weekend to watch the final games, and then do this all over again for the bracket breakdown. Incredibly excited to do that for the next couple of weeks.
Oh man, Andy, this music just started again. What is happening? It is 1:47 a.m. Central Standard Time. People, come on now. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us here on post-selection Sunday, Monday. I cannot wait for Thursday. It's going to be so great. Thank you for joining us. If you're not subscribed to the Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or on audio, make sure you do that right now, as well as our Discord. Again, that link is in the show notes, and it's absolutely free to join. We'd love to have you there with all us other junkies talking college basketball all day long. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild. Pope shouts to McBruins, and until tomorrow, peace.